Okay, we'll wait here for a few minutes. We're gonna get all the students in here.
I was like, who's driving the computer?
It's Leia, yeah. Yeah,
Why is so that she gave me a reference letter yesterday? I think I told you that. So
yes,
I
yeah.
was like, I was
That's so
surprised.
nice.
Yeah.
Definitely take advantage of it.
Next Steps Alumni event and panel. So we have 3 awesome panelists here this evening. We're going to have them introduce themselves here, but for those of you joining in person and online, we're excited to have you here because it's been a great week here at HU with Career Week and all the different events, but we wanted to have a hallmark event here in our new building and bring some of our alumni back so that they could see it and engage with you and network a little bit. So just to start us off, I would love our alumni to take some time to introduce themselves, what your major was when you were here at HU, but also your current role with the organization or graduate school that you're with currently. So Aiden, we'll start with you.
Oh, there it goes. Hi, I'm Aiden Rogers. I was a class of 2020 grad in the biotech program. I am currently actually in a transitional period between roles. So on Monday, I will become a quality assurance supervisor at the Dairy Farmers of America. Before then, I was a scientist at Eurofins. So that's me, I'm Aiden.
Hey everyone, my name is Angel Brown. I was class of 21 in the interactive media program. My concentration was advanced media production. Now I'm a digital marketing specialist and designer at a health tech company called Uniform.
Hey everyone, Brad Popuri. I was a 2020 graduate of the Masters in Analytics program. I currently work for a company called IQVIA. I lead the digital transformation across enterprise. So folks who are interested in pharma, life sciences, feel free to hit me up.
Awesome. I know when you all were here, you had such a great time integrating with your professors, but you were also involved in some clubs and organizations around campus. But we would love to hear how you transitioned from being at HU into your professional careers and also to graduate school. And what were some of the challenges that you may have faced during that transition? Because it is an interesting time when you're here, all your friends are here, you've been here for a couple years, and then you go and leave us. So what was that like? Yeah, go ahead.
So I would say the weirdest part about leaving HU is that COVID started when I left. So that caused everything to go from like, okay, you're going to have an in-person interview to, well, now everything's remote. You're going to meet us on Teams or Zoom, and then we'll go from there. So that was strange when COVID started. Now, luckily, everything is like back to normal for the most part. So I don't think you guys will have that weird, awkward, like Zoom interview thing unless it's a company far away. But that being said, at the end of COVID, I was kind of like, I don't know what I want to do. So I went to grad school. So I did a master's of biotech at Penn State up in main campus. It was what they call like an accelerated program. So I was there for a year and then did 6 months of working in the industry and then had my graduation. But yeah, it's strange to transition from school your whole life and then also doing grad school and then working because you're like, I have so much free time now. And now I have to find a hobby and figure out what to do. And yeah, so it's definitely interesting, but if you just ease into it, it should be fine. So that's my opinion on that.
For me, the challenge with transition was how fast that it happens. So for me, I secured my post-grad internship like 3-4 months before I graduated. And then I didn't really take much of a break in between because I was so eager to get into the working field. So celebrating graduation, but also keeping in the back of my mind, like, how am I going to prep so that I'll be ready for this new organization, this new space. But the way I dealt with that was just making sure I didn't take a full mental break, like 100%, okay, yep, done, hands off. Because it's truly a transition, like it's not just this stage ends, this one begins. So just step by step, making sure I still had my scholar brain working and then applying that to the professional field.
So for me, I continued working through my grad program. I actually enrolled at the PhD program. I'm trying to finish it while working full time. So for me, time management was a really important skill to have. One thing I would recommend folks who are graduating to do is to make a 30, 60, 90-day plan. Like you're going to have a lot of free time like the panelists mentioned, but be very intentional about how you spend that time, what skills you want to pick up, what are the certifications that you think will help you with your first job. So.
So leading into that first job, so you went to school, grad school, got into that first job. So that is another transition period. Could you just share a little bit more of what that transition period was like, and maybe a memory or a tip as students transition into that first role when they're done with grad school, or here at HU if you want to start, you can.
I would say, try to get a good work-life balance, because you'll be at work for 40 hours a week and then you have the extra time, but you also don't want to drain yourself immediately. Like, a lot of people hit the ground running and they're like, oh my God, I love my job so much, hopefully. And, you commit yourself to it and you spend so much time thinking about it and answering emails off the clock and like all that stuff. But slow down, like, it's fine. Like, I remember doing that and having imposter syndrome when I started my first job, because I was like, all right, like, I'm here and I feel like I need to overperform because I'm young and, this is my first job. So I feel like I need to be the person that's replying to emails on Saturday morning, but you don't at all. And I regret doing that. But, just your imposter syndrome, I think everybody feels it, but you don't need to go too hard on yourself with it. So.
Just adding to that imposter syndrome. So if some of you folks end up in consulting, you'll see that like a recurring theme. A lot of folks will be sending you out as an expert on a field. You probably have like 3 months of training, and that's just the nature of the profession. So what I would say is have an open mind, roll with the punches, and like be willing to be humble and be open-minded about what you're being asked to do. There are folks who are going to help you. There are folks who are going to put you down, but you got to build your own support system, both at work and outside of work. Can't be just around work, like Aiden mentioned. So, yeah.
One thing that Ada kind of touched on was being the youngest person there. I'm usually the youngest person in my office. Right now, I'm the youngest person in my office, and I'm also the only person that looks like me in my office. So when you come from a qualified place like HU and you can aim high and go to those places where you might be the youngest or the only person that looks like you, definitely trust the skill set that you have, trust the knowledge that you have, because of course not everybody will be accepting that you're there and they're like, how did she get here? Well, you check my resume, you check my degree, you check my experience, I'm pretty qualified to be here. So definitely, don't think egotistically of yourself, but be confident in your skills, be confident in who you are, be confident in the experience you've been able to get up to that point.
I'm glad you touched on that a little bit, especially with the skill sets that you gained, especially Angel in your interactive media program. I think really aided you as you were going forward in your roles that you can showcase to those employers that you were applying to. So can you all just share a little bit about how your education and some of the experiences that you had related to that helped you land that first role?
I would say being in the sciences, like I was talking to you two out in the lobby, you get so much experience because your classes are small. And I know you might be like, okay, well, there's only like 5 other people in my classes, but that's actually a good thing. And even my grad school program had very small class sizes as well. You actually get the chance to be hands-on with things. And when I got to grad school, which I went to Penn State, I was one of the few people in my program that knew ahead of time the experimental techniques that we were doing, because I did them so much with like Dr. Taylor and Dr. Patterkini and Dr. Maddox, because the class sizes were so small and I was able to be a lab tech and stuff like that. So I would say all the hands-on experience you get here will help you, even if you're like you might not think of it now, but put everything that you can on your resume that you do here. So.
I'll say the biggest thing that's really grateful about from being at HU is we're trained on industry level software. Like the exact thing that they're using right now is what you guys are being trained on. So it's down to the point where in every position I've had, especially this one, no new software has popped up. How I use it may be new and what I use it for, but when I say like verbatim software, the exact method and things like that, it's going to be a huge plus when you're actively in the field. And, you know, even when you want to go for those higher paying jobs, the fact that you already know what, you know, they're working with and how to work it is a huge deal.
So one tip I'll give you as probably the most experienced guy on the panel here is networking is a hugely important skill. So put some effort into like reaching out, like making cold emails over LinkedIn or calling folks from the alumni to say, I see you work at this company or you work at this company. Can you help me understand how do I succeed in my current role? You know, I'm just graduate from HU. You'd be surprised how many people would be willing to like spend time and like make sure they're giving back to the student community. So that's one skill that is helpful. And again, as a graduate student, for me, time is limited. So I spend a lot of time just networking with my classmates to say, what are the skills I need to succeed? And if there's something that was missing from my repertoire, I'd actually rely on them. So not a big fan of programming, never been. So I'd actually sit down with someone who's really good from a different department to say, help me understand how I go through this. So, yeah.
Brad, I'm glad you touched on networking a little bit, and I would love to hear from Angel and Aiden specifically, since you're in different industries, how you leverage networking in your current roles, but also while you were here at HU as an undergrad student.
I love networking and also like dread it sometimes too, because you're like, especially when you are the youngest person in the room, you're like, oh, like it's so awkward sometimes, but you know, just put that aside and, you know, introduce yourself and say who you are and what you're doing. Like I always tell people to LinkedIn is like, I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but like I got my first job off LinkedIn. And I think I got the job that I just got off LinkedIn as well. So having that profile and connecting with people, even if you just meet them in passing at like an event, or like even if your job does trade shows, like connecting with them there, because there's been so many times where I've come back to a connection that I've made like more recently that I made like when I was in undergrad, that I'm like, I'll reach out and be like, do you have any open roles? And they're like, oh yeah, like I actually do. So it is important, and you know, you never know who you'll run into again, so just keep a pleasant contact with everybody.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to hop on the LinkedIn train. LinkedIn is definitely important. It's also how I got the role I have now. Recruiters reached out to me via LinkedIn. But I was sharing with the current students here with LinkedIn. When I started job hunting, one thing I started to do was the companies that I wanted to work at, I started finding their marketing department, people that was specialists, managers, from the biggest role to the smallest role, and started connecting with them to the point that I had like this copy and paste little paragraph I would send them. It was like when I wanted to connect with them, I like add a message. Hi, my name is Amy Brown. I'm a recent grad of Graduate University. Just wanted to extend my network with the digital marketing program. And I would send that out because like it was what's it called? Send like a postcard. Yeah, it was like muscle memory at that point. But it really helped. You know, they would answer back. They would say, "Oh, I'm glad that you reached out," and you just never know what that can turn into. And then always connect with the people that you work with. For example, in my internship, the lady who was the marketing director there is now like the senior vice president of marketing at this big like financial organization. So yeah, definitely stay connected. If it's just sending out a simple message, and like you said, keep a pleasant contact with people.
Brad, do you have anything else to add? Okay, awesome. I wanted to give you another opportunity there. So each of you, mentioned that you got to have some experiences inside the classroom, in the lab. I know experiential learning was a big part of your experience while you're here, even at the master's level for you, Brad, to expand your skill sets a little more. So could you speak a little bit, maybe how you leveraged your project 1 and 2, or your internship, or other projects with faculty and research that you did now in your current role?
So my project was a little bit more relevant for getting myself into grad school and also my first job, because those, like, I was a development scientist at my first job, And my manager at the time also was really interested in cancer biology, which is what my project was about. So I was able to leverage that with him and have that common ground to talk about. That's always nice. And also, like I was saying earlier, when you first started at HU, I was like, I don't really know how to interview people. And you're like, well, just come into my office and I'll interview you. And I was like, okay. And so that helped a lot because I didn't have my first in-person interview until literally like 2 months ago because of the whole COVID thing and because of like just how crazy jobs can be. And so I was walking in there and I was like, oh my God, I've never done an in-person interview. Like, how do I even do this? And I was like, okay, well, wait, just you shake your hands and I brought copies of my resume, which she always told us to do. And I even updated my resume for the people that I was interviewing with. So things like that, like actually, like if she's like, hey, I'll sit down and interview you, like do it. And I think she's looked at my resume when I was in undergrad, like too many times to count. So just take advantage of that because it does help.
I would say the biggest magnet on my LinkedIn is what I got out of my project 1 and 2. I wound up doing a program called Stream, and through it I obtained my Facebook digital marketing certificate. That is like every time I get a message from a recruiter, it's like, oh, I found you based on your certificate. And then with that program, we had to do a presentation. I believe it was the presentation to pass your project too. And then for the job I have now, in order to get hired, I had to do a presentation of a recent project that I've done and how I put together and things. So I definitely utilized that to present to the board at my now job, and it was like the CEO, the SVP, director, like the big hitters. You would think that you would meet them like a little later down the line, but they're like, no, we're going to check you out now. So I was super grateful to have that presentation, to have the terminology, the knowledge, actual things that I can show, the chart, the campaign strategy, and all those things. So not only did it help me get my job, but then it also helps me still have like relevancy when it comes to the workforce.
So, adding to definitely what Aiden and Angel added to, I think one thing that does get looked upon sort of differently in the industry is you're coming from a safe space where any idea is valid. There tends to be a little more soft glove approach, whereas as soon as you hit the industry running, they tend to be like, stop wasting my time. What is it for me? Like, how do we get this either into the customer's hands, or what is it that you want the company to do to support this initiative? So I'd say like use your last 3 months very intentionally, like prepare ahead to say, I'm stepping out, how do I get ready for that real world? Like what are the skills I need to do in terms of, sprucing up my LinkedIn? Should I wear this to work? Like if you guys don't know Dr. Rebecca or like some of the folks from Career Services and say, I have this big interview, can you help me like pick out an outfit? Like I know it's basic, but think about those things. And yeah, definitely scrub anything you posted online that you wouldn't want anyone finding, because most companies do look into that when they're looking into your background. So, some companies let it slide, but some companies don't. So just be cautious on your online presence.
That's great advice, Brad. And I really like that all of you have kind of embraced one thing that we want for you while you're here at HU. Not only learn with us while you're here, but continue to learn even when you leave us and come back like you three do and integrate with us, because we want you to be a lifelong learner, because things change and adapt all the time. But Angel, you alluded to this earlier. You got to be exposed to different certifications and courses throughout your time, and now that technology has aided you in your current role. So can you three share a little bit more about how you are continuing to learn, even though you've received your degrees, and upskill a little bit so you can continue to be relevant in your field of interest?
So at the job, when I was at Eurofins, I was a biochemist. Like that was the hat that I wore. But here I took like one biochem class. So I learned a lot about like HPLC and that kind of thing, and working on the like full-time equivalent side of pharmaceuticals. So learning that kind of stuff and taking it in stride, and like not thinking of it as like, man, this isn't like what I went to school for, but thinking of it as like, how can I use this in the future? Or do I want to use this in the future? Which is also a fine thing to think. But yeah, I would say keeping, staying relevant in your field, because it's a science and technology school. So you're kind of at the epicenter of everything changing around you. And so being keen on that helps you impress future employers and the people that you work with, like when you're proposing projects or research topics. So don't stop learning and just kind of revisit everything as you can.
One of my biggest things just in life in general is to do things scared. A lot of times it's like you're asked to do something, you may not know what it is, you like tense up, you're like, oh no. But one thing I've learned with my job now is even the stuff I don't know, I say yes to just because it will force me to learn something new, to try something new. Before, a few months prior, they asked me to host our webinars for our health plans and stuff. I don't come from a health background. So I was like, sure, okay, yeah. But through doing it, I've been able to gain confidence in what I'm saying, learn terminology, learn how to use Zoom in a new way, which is like one of the leading ways we host meetings and things like that. And now I've become the one who pushes the entire project like every month. So definitely, do things scared. Don't be scared to like try new things because you'll never know what you'll learn and then how well you'll learn it that you might be the one who leads it later down the line.
So for me, I think, again, like I said, more experience than some of my co-panelists. So one thing I will share is learning never stops. 40 to 50% of my day-to-day job is just doing research, even as a director. And I oversee a pretty large group of people. I have 1,300 reports across 7 countries. And most of the work they do is to come to me to say, I have a problem here, help me figure out how do I get beyond this. That will be expected of you, so start preparing for that. If someone puts you in a, like my co-panelist said, puts a position that makes you uncomfortable, look at it like a learning opportunity. As early career graduates, I would say get some basic certifications in project management and Scrum certifications or technology certifications. SQL is a good skill to have, irrespective of what background you're in. R is another language that you learn. If you're going into sciences, that's like an expectation now. So start looking for those basics, and then you can build your resume from there.
Brad, I think you know the questions that I'm going to ask to lead into next, and I love it. It's really aiding this evening. But sometimes, students encounter different challenges while they're here throughout their time. But I'd love to hear from you. We know, as moderator and panelist, that challenges happen all the time, personally, professionally. But our community that we're here with, day to day, we can't just go down Market Street to the other residence hall and see our friend and talk with them and talk through it, or meet with our student success team to talk through it. So how can you get through some of those different challenges and setbacks that you might have in your role in life without the different supports that are here on your campus when you leave?
What Angel said about doing things scared, because I always like to say that you don't grow in your comfort zone and you're gonna be uncomfortable, so you might as well just let it happen. And when you're in your career, things happen, like you probably read about like big tech company layoffs and stuff like that, but that's why it's important, and why I think like Rebecca stresses this so much, is networking and LinkedIn and keeping good relationships with people, because you never know, like if you do land on hard times, maybe you'll reach out to an alumni or one of your classmates who, you see something that they're doing and you're like, oh, that sounds really cool, I would love to do that. And you reach out and it might land you a job. Like you just never really know. And so like when you're in those moments, like low moments or down moments, just remember that, you do have people in your corner, whether or not you talk to them every day, like that's okay. But just remember that you do have people that you can ask for help for, and it's okay to ask for help, and just never be afraid of that.
To piggyback off what Aiden said, honestly, be honest with yourself. Something disappoints you, it's okay to feel disappointed about it. Try not to just bulldoze over your feelings about anything, because you don't want that to carry over into the next thing that you do. And then, of course, lean on your support system. For me, mine is my family. My mom is like right there. So yeah, that's to get out those emotions that I felt.
Yeah, for me, I think I do a lot of campus hiring for senior roles. So I'm usually recruiting folks who are finishing their MBA, who have some experience. So one of the things I do look for is values. So is this person someone who operates with integrity? Is this someone, who I can trust in a tough spot? And it's not just for me, but also for my company, because folks in the wrong places with the wrong attitude can make those mistakes. So my recommendation to you guys is to start inculcating those values early on in your career. Always make sure you're above board and transparent with what you do. You will be put in difficult situations, and I'm not going to lie, it's going to be messy, but as long as you are operating with a sense of transparency and integrity, you will come out on top. That's definitely something to sort of practice and inculcate. Second thing, to just sort of build on what they said, is to practice mindfulness. You gotta be really intentional about what you're saying, and at the same time what you're doing. Like, do your words track with your actions? Because people will hear you talk, but then they will look at you and judge you based on your actions more than anything.
Aiden, you talked about this a little earlier, thinking about your values. Brad, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we have integrated in our seminar courses for our students to begin to think about, what do you value personally? Because as you go forward into your work life, you need to be mindful of that. Just the culture there, your own values, your culture with your family and your friends at home. But trying to balance all of that can be difficult. So how do you three try to strive for that work-life balance? Now, Aiden, you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I would love to hear a little bit more about that.
So my first job out of grad school, I did not have a good work-life balance. My boyfriend Troy is in the second row. He can attest to that. I was like, I'm going to get fired if I don't, do all this extra work, and if I don't basically break my back. That wasn't the case. I did not get fired there. I left on my own terms. And then my second job at Eurofins, you're not even allowed to put your work email on your phone because of security reasons. You just can't, which I was like, oh, this is wonderful. And, I would go there, I would work my 8 hours and I would leave, and that was it. But then you have that free time, and you can kind of I noticed this among my friend group when we all first started working our 9 to 5s. You get home and you're you tend to be exhausted from the day because you're thinking all day and you're doing stuff and you're on your feet or whatever. And you just want to lay in bed and watch TV. But it's important to not always do that. Of course, you can lay in bed, it's fine. You should do that sometimes. But find a hobby, find something that you like to do, whether it's finding a new restaurant or joining a gym or something like that. You can't just get into that habit of I wake up, I go to work, I come home, I get in my bed, and I do nothing, because you'll be feeling pretty sad about that. So yeah, work-life balance is very important. Try to figure that out as soon as you can in your career.
One thing for me is when my workday ends, it ends. So I do not think about work when I'm with family or when I'm off the clock. I make sure I put forth my best effort, when I do have my working hours and have meetings and things like that. But I definitely prioritize, and I'm even at a place where the job also prioritizes family. So making sure that I keep, my thoughts for that time here, and then my family fun time is over here. Try not to integrate the two, and that's how I pretty much keep everything balanced.
So I really like the question here where it says, what role did resilience and adaptability play? I think those are important skill sets to have. So for me, just given that I lead a distributed team, I am usually thinking about work if I'm awake. That's just to make sure my folks are empowered, they have everything they need, and I'm making sure I'm setting them up for success. So sometimes it means walking into a room not knowing the problem, where everyone is looking at you saying, you have the solution, so give us the decision in 5 minutes. So again, it's important to be mindful of those situations, take a step back, ascertain all the facts, and if you don't know, be humble and just say, listen, I don't have enough facts at this point to make a decision. Let's revisit this in a couple of days once I've sort of vetted everything. It's really important that you start doing that at an early age, because you can quickly develop a reputation as a yes man, which is not something you want. Bring your individuality, bring your personality, and sort of live through that at work as well.
So you talked a little bit about work-life balance right now professionally after you've left HU, but I want you to think back to when you were at HU and maybe give some advice to some of the current students in the room and online. What are some tips that, looking back, that you could give to the students of how they can manage like their time here on campus and priorities? Because there's a lot going on. They have their experiential learning they're trying to do with their faculty and staff. There's also clubs. There's concerts now that they can go to and engage with here at HU. So what are some tips that you would give to our students?
I don't know if I can answer this as well as maybe the other panelists because I was a commuter student. So I didn't live on campus. I lived in Camp Hill. And then when I wasn't at school, I was working. I had a part-time job at Brewster's Ice Cream in Camp Hill. So I don't think that I had the traditional experience in a sense, but when I was here, I was trying to use my time effectively. So I was working also as a lab tech, which if you can get some sort of on-campus job, I think that you should, especially if it's in your major and it will be valuable to you. That lab tech experience was actually one of the biggest things on my resume that helped me get into grad school and then get a job. So, I can't really speak on what to do in your free time while you're on campus, but just get involved as much as you can is what I would say.
Yeah, for me, I was an in-person student. I was in almost every performance club possible, just because that's how that was my healthy outlet. That was how I made friends. That was how I gained experiences with networking and just being a social butterfly, as my mom would call it. But then other than that, another big tip is try not to procrastinate, because when you procrastinate, this was a big thing for me, which is why I'm not saying it. When you procrastinate, you take away the hours you would have had during your free time. So try to stay on top of your workload so that when you're done, you're actually done. Okay, you can actually have, the whole weekend to yourself to, have fun, release, be with friends, and things like that.
Yeah, so I actually went back to grad school after my master's program and decided I'll get a PhD. I'm now going to go get an exec MBA at MIT after my degree in December. So time management is something that I have to live by. So for me, I actually block time on my calendar every day. Even for this event, I've allocated 3 hours to know this is when time runs out, because then I go do something else. But for folks who are just graduating, I'd say maintain that discipline of saying, I used to study 3 hours a week doing this assignment. Use that time effectively to build yourself, do a hobby, go pick a sport, do something that gives you an outlet away from work, or something that enhances just your life in some positive way. You're going to have to do that more and more, because as you start climbing up the ranks, what will happen is folks will ask you to go back to school and get a graduate degree. If you don't practice that and if you keep working for a few years, then you've got to go back to grad school. It gets really, really difficult to suddenly unlearn all those habits. So just retain what you're learning right now and just keep those good habits going.
I think these are all really good tips, especially we have some students in the room and online that are graduating this upcoming December and in May. Yeah. So would love to hear some tips for those students, especially to begin to think about over these next couple months. I'm going to be transitioning out from HU. How can I begin to set myself up for the workforce or going on to graduate school?
I feel like the first 2 years after you're done with school are the most fun. And I think that you should enjoy that and kind of reap the benefits of that new stage of your life, because it's one that you'll never get to have again. But yeah, when you graduate, it all moves very fast. And there's been many times where I found myself thinking to myself, I never thought I would be here. Or I never thought I would be doing this. But in a positive way. I never thought that I would go to trade shows and meet all these people and network myself with them, or I never thought that I would develop an experiment that's used in schools across the country this year. Like I never could have pictured that. And so like as you're leaving school and you're entering like the real world, just be ready for anything and take it with a grain of salt and just kind of go with the flow. Be flexible. Your goals can and will and probably should change, and just let that be how it will be.
One thing I did was definitely think of the big picture as you get down to the wire. You're about to graduate. The decisions you make now, whether that is to, okay, do I want to obtain another certification? Should I take this free time for this now, or should I do research on the industry that I want to become a part of? So definitely, even just 1 or 2 years down the line, even just a couple months, honestly, start to do now what will affect you, where you want to place yourself. For me, I know I didn't want to go in at like the typical entry level job to a degree. So I made sure that I set myself up in a way where I had the experience, qualifications, the portfolio that I can, go in a little bit higher than most people do.
So again, coming from an experience perspective, just given the nature of the education at Harrisburg University, you're going to find doors being open for you just given where we are with technology. So sort of embrace that, but how you succeed from entering really depends on who you are as an individual. So keep working on building those skill sets, right? So something I see often is, we try to recruit now from the master's program into my industry in pharma, where we're trying to take more and more folks with analytical skill sets into data science roles in pharma. It shouldn't stop you guys from applying for those jobs. So don't self-select out. Don't say this job looks like I may not qualify. Apply for it. At the most, you get a rejection. At least you will go through that process, so you will understand what companies look for, how you need to tweak your resume, how do I practice for these sort of interviews.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Brad, because students really need to pay attention to some of the trends that are happening in their industry, but also outside their industry, because they may have some of the skill sets for another industry. Angel, you were in an interactive media role, a heavily media-focused company initially, and now you're working for a healthcare informatics type of organization, but you're still able to use your skill sets, which I think is outstanding. So how can students really hone into looking at those trends related to their role, their industry, so that they can be mindful as they go forward in their roles?
I think it depends. Like trend-wise, I guess we can just umbrella it as the life sciences, like that's biotech, biochem, pharma, etc. A lot of it is large molecules and cancer therapeutics, HIV drugs, things like that, you can either be on the R&D side of things, or you can be on the stability and functionality testing side of things. I think we'll see a big shift with the implications of AI, so that's also something to be keen on. But the trends for the life sciences are usually generally the same. You can be a scientist, you can be a developer, a researcher, you can, I'm stepping into a management role, there's things like that. So it's a pretty flexible field, and you can do a lot within it. It just really depends on what you want to do.
I would say make sure you stay up to date with the software and hardware that's being used in your industry. For instance, anybody in media lives in Adobe. That's what your life's gonna be. So stay up to date, follow their blogs, follow their trends of what they're doing. Hence, if you, when you graduate, you think you know all that Adobe can do, and then a new feature pops out, or, a new study of it pops out, you want to make sure that you know, so that you're always on, the latest and the greatest of your industry software.
Just to add to those two excellent points, what I did when I first started out was I actually formally instituted a board of directors for my career. So these are folks who I went out, I actively said, I need you to be my mentor because you have this experience, and in 5 years I want to be at your level. In 10 years I want to be at your level. So I benefited from their collective wisdom to say, how do I make director before I hit 35? How do I make VP before I hit 40? So I had those goals clearly defined early on for myself. And it worked. So honestly, like be very intentional with your time, with your effort. In addition to those tech skills, you gotta have people skills. So if there is something that you're uncomfortable with, now is the time to practice. Like make full use of the auditorium, come here and give a presentation on a topic that you're not familiar with at all. Yes, it's not going to be perfect, but it will get that routine of like being uncomfortable out, and after you do a few of these, you will be really good at it.
When we all graduated in various times in our lives, some people like to give you a book or a piece of advice or a quote. I know for me, someone told me to dream big. And Walt Disney's quote, "If you can dream it, you can do it." So I have that plaque on my shelf in my office here, and I try to keep that in mind. So I like to ask this question of alumni and different people that I interact with, but what quote or book or even blog or media would you recommend for a student as a piece of advice?
There is a poem hanging on my wall that my mom sent me when I was in undergrad, and it's Desiderata by Max Ehrmann. And I think the one for me, it's like, I don't remember the whole thing, but I always stare at this line and it goes, "No doubt the universe is unfolding exactly how it should." And I always try to keep that in the back of my head.
When you're graduating, a lot of people face with a lot of disappointment, a lot of no's. I was telling some students earlier, I think I applied to like 100 places for my first time position, but out of doing that, I was able to get a yes from 3, and then I was able to kind of bid and see which ones, really had the best environment for me to work in. So one of the ideas I keep in mind is every no isn't a final destination, it's just a redirection. You never know what was on the other side of that, in the future. It could not have been all that you dreamed it was going to be. So take a no as a redirection to start in a new place, look in a new direction, and always learn something new.
So I think just to add, rejection is something you're going to have to learn to live with initially, and that's true for all of us. Like I remember applying to maybe 500 jobs in an Excel, like this job, this location, this title, and they were all like, "Nope, we're not hiring you, we're not hiring you." And I was like, okay, clearly this is not working. So I went back to the drawing board and I was like, I got to create a resume for each of these different kinds of jobs that appeal to them. But yes, so from an attitude perspective, just be self-aware. Rejection is fine. They get a lot of these applications where they're going to look at your cohort and say, "Yeah, he graduated from Harrisburg, she graduated from Harrisburg. What sets this person apart from this person?" So that's what happens initially. So be mindful of how you apply and don't internalize that rejection. It's not about you. They haven't even met you as a person. It's just your resume. The other thing I did early on in my career was I did a lot of networking. So I would go hang out at golf events and like hang out with folks who are like at 10, 15 years the level I aspire to be. And like I'd network with them. I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm a fresh graduate. I'm a consultant. I'm an associate consultant. I want to be at your level in 10 years. How do I get there? Like what worked for you?" So build your own community. Like look for people who are mentors. LinkedIn is a great place to do that. I still do that. I still reach out to folks now at the C-suite and I'm like, "Can you help me understand how that journey looked from director to C-suite?" So be intentional with your time and effort.
All good things. Thank you all. Well, we're going to open it up here shortly to the room and to folks online, but wanted to give you one final chance to give one piece of advice to our audience to leave them with. So I'd like to hear from each of you.
I would say learn early on how to take accountability for the things that you do at work, whether it's good or negative. Just get used to that and just be flexible and keep an open mind. I think that's the best advice that I can give you guys. Just go with the flow and be willing to learn and be ready to learn.
My thing would be definitely find, if you haven't already, find that thing that you're really, really good at. Like something that, like Brad said, sets you apart from everybody else. It can be something, for me, it's simple as when I work on video things, I'm really, really good at timing. It's just like something that can't be taught in the classroom.
think I'll just say enjoy the ride. You're like embarking on a great journey. You're transitioning from undergrad to the workforce. It's just going to be a lot of real world learning. So just be cognizant of that and, enjoy the ride.
Well, thank you for your insight, all of you. Just want to open it up for the audience and for folks online to ask our esteemed alumni any questions that they have. Any questions? If there's any. Oh, Cody.
I have a question for Brad.
Okay.
So you mentioned, so I'm analytics concentration, and you mentioned R being, kind of like an industry standard. Is there any other software that you could recommend that would kind of, help a young analyst, differentiate themselves from other applicants?
So you're an analytics major with focus in any one particular industry or just industry agnostic?
No industry focus.
Okay. I would say definitely pick up Python and SQL. Along with R, those are two skills that, you're going to have to use. And this, I think, stands as a general advice. Don't forget your stats. Like, I remember throwing out my stats book. I now go, by stats book on a regular basis because I'm like, someone talked about central limit theorem in a meeting today, and I'm like, why is that relevant? So, yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I'm literally doing that right now.
Yeah.
Other questions? AJ.
We talked about this a lot, but going from a post-pandemic world, we can say that now, it's a post-pandemic world, into a more in-person, face-to-face situation for a lot of us. For students that are predominantly in Harrisburg, predominantly on campus, and like you mentioned, maybe going from school to directly to work, can you just elaborate on the validity of exploring what you really like outside of school, or building a network outside of your major, or building kind of rapport with your city around you? What's the importance of it, and how might you achieve that?
Say it is important to establish yourself not only here while you're a student, but when you move to wherever your job is. If you do move for your job, or if your job is remote, that can also feel a little strange and isolating. I know I have 2 friends in my life that work remote. But if your company offers events, do it. If you can go to a trade show, do it. You might feel a little uncomfortable because you're traveling with your company or something like that, but just do it. And then when you're home, for example, my new job is a dairy co-op, so we're sourcing dairy from farms around here. And so that's really nice, and I'm very excited to hopefully get to meet the farmers even and that kind of stuff. But just, think about how what you're doing impacts your life around you and how you can build upon that and go from there.
One thing I do at home is, I'm from Baltimore, that's where I live also, and, we're kind of we call it charm city. We're big on arts and music and things like that, and being someone who's interested in media production and does graphics and things like that, we always have pop-up shops, where small businesses can come to and showcase what they have and things of that nature. So definitely, even if you have to go alone, go into small events, where, you'll be around people who share the same interests or who might need a skill set that you have. Can be a huge thing, take some business cards with you, get out there, turn into social networking butterfly, and yeah, that'd be my biggest advice.
So for me, I moved to Harrisburg from New Jersey. I lived all over the country as a consultant or travel. So what brought me back to Harrisburg is what you touched upon, the sense of community and wanting to be able to give back to the university that's given me a lot of opportunities. I remember when I was interviewing for my current role, I used to call Gene and be like, hey, I'm applying for a director role at 35 in a Fortune 250 company. It seems very facetious of me to think I would even qualify. And Gene was like, no, go for it. The worst they'll say is no. So I was like, okay, fine. And now here I am, 2 years into the role, and I'm the youngest guy in that room. I know I'll be the youngest guy, senior director. But building that sense of community that you can trust on, rely on, to come back to and say, outside of work, these are my people, is really important. Because now I'm able to come back and say, H, you gave me a lot. these are the ways I can productively give back to the university. So start thinking about that, like even hobbies. I enjoy watch making, so I don't like wear electronic watches. Who knew Litus, of all the places, Litus is this place where they have this great school where you can go learn watchmaking from the folks who make Rolexes. So, and I met a lot of colleagues in the industry who have an appreciation for fine watches at that school. So you never know how it turns out. So.
I'll just add, even if you go on to graduate school or you go to a new place for a job, even for a short time, I would say invest in that community. Even if your HU community isn't with you, but you're going to that new place, get engaged, get to know some of the different clubs that may be there at your new school or in the area so you can get to know other people. If there's volunteering events, get involved with that because you're going to miss your people here at HU and you're going to need to build that new community. And it's not always easy, but then you'll find that community there. And even if you move again, that community will always be a part of you and you never know how you can continue to be connected to them. So don't be afraid to connect. I know we didn't connect the last several years because of the pandemic, and it can be scary to come back together, but I would encourage you to do that. So, other questions? Yeah.
So, like, what are the challenges, like me as an international student, like going to face when I'm getting into the career, especially as students who don't have any background in analytics or tech, going into a tech background, what are the challenges they are going to face?
So I think your case will be particularly more challenging than some of your fellow students here because at the undergrad level, not a lot of companies are willing to say, as an international student, I'm going to hire this person, also sponsor for their work visa because it's an expensive proposition for them. But you can actually flip it to your advantage if you know what you're doing. So for example, a lot of now big tech companies want life sciences folks with like research and lab experience because they're trying to build those devices. So look for those roles that will actually set you apart from folks who are already applying, and try to make what's your USP, right? Like what's your proposition to the company? Why should they hire you? Like start thinking about that. That really helped me too because a lot of times, I was at a big four consulting firm. There was nothing different from the guy next to me or the girl next to me. But yeah, like I actively looked at my resume every day and said, what am I doing on a daily basis that sets me apart? So start thinking on those things.
Yes, like continue on this, especially most of my colleagues are working right now. So I'm a particular student. I'm just thinking I'm entering. I just completed my undergrad. I'm just entering into masters. I'm going into a career. But with persons who are nearly who with me already working in the work industry. So that's how it's going to be the curious thing.
So I think it's a little challenging for me to give you very specific advice without understanding more details. But let me also give you maybe a word of caution, right? Like a lot of folks who finish their undergrad go to master's programs, and that's fine. But if you have work experience, that learning that you get from a master's degree is much more impactful. So think about that, and you talked about your friends who are already working, so you already have a network you can tap into, right? So start there and say, hey, I don't mind putting in the grunt work, I don't mind starting at the associate level. What are the opportunities you can create from it?
One last question. Any last questions? No, I don't think so. All right. Well, let's give a round of applause for our panelists. Awesome. Well, thank you to our panelists and everyone that came out this evening and to Career Week. We have a final event tomorrow for our grad students that are here for our executive weekend. So we're excited to engage with them tomorrow. But thank you all for attending Career Week. It's been